Good afternoon and a warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, presenters, and guests to this event, which is organized by the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development with the assistance of the South African Embassy in Athens and the Greek Embassy in South Africa, and is under the auspices of the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises, the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Greek Exporters Association. In starting with our webinar, I would like to introduce the president of our chamber, Dr. Sotiris Mousouris. Dr. Sotiris Mousouris is the founder of our Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development, and Dr. Mousouris has been decorated with the Grand Companion Oliver Tambo Award, which has been honored by President Thabo Mbeki in Pretoria in April 2006 for the excellent contribution to the struggle against apartheid and for contributing to the development of the African continent. Dr. Mousouris, as Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, he was director of the Center Against Apartheid from 1987 to 1992 and visited several times South Africa, meeting, amongst others, with Nelson Mandela and many other personalities of the country. Dr. Mousouris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andonis, for reminding us of a really very important historical period of humankind and glorious, I would say, for South Africa, for the peaceful abolition of apartheid. For that, the United Nations played a role, and I'm proud of being part of it. I have been to South Africa several times. In one occasion, I had a meeting with Albertina Sisulu, the mother of the current ambassador of South Africa to Greece. She will speak immediately after me. In another occasion, when I was in Cape Town, I was the guest in his house of the then consul of Greece to South Africa, and now ambassador of Greece to South Africa, George Aravositas, an esteemed member of our diplomacy. But more important, the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce was born in the house of the South African ambassador in Athens. I was there with Eleni Vassou and the then ambassador David Jacobs. And since then, we are following events in South Africa very closely. And we have appreciated the impact of South Africa on democracy in the African continent and development. And I'm talking about NEPAD, which was an initiative of South Africa. The leadership of Nelson Mandela, foremost, and Thabo Mbeki, and the current president, Cyril Ramaphosa, left a real mark for democracy and for development of the whole Africa, and they have been really honored in all parts of the world. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good friends. Greece is extremely interested in South Africa, and many Greeks have been living in this country for many years. They have done very well. They have been successful in all sectors of the economy and science, from law. You remember the hero of the struggle, George Bizos, and in business. We have Mr. Nicolaou here and others who have been very successful in their work in South Africa. Qualitatively, the relation of business relations of Greeks in South Africa is very important. Quantitatively is something missing. We need more. We need more trade and more investment. And this discussion we have today, I think, hopefully will materialize dreams, plans, projects for trade and for investment in South Africa by Greeks and vice versa. The dynamic character of Greek businessmen is very close to that of South Africans. And they have intuitive and they have an entrepreneurship in their blood. I believe this is the first attempt to bring close Greek businessmen with South Africans, and we plan to follow with more action, maybe with sectoral meetings, and eventually with a business mission, where we will be supported by the European Business Council for Africa. This is an organization of European chambers that deal only with Africa, which is based in Brussels. And it's very important because this way the private sector brings to the attention of the European Commission their problems and their proposals. And it's very interesting that Greeks are in top in that organization, Ambassador Spachis and Mr. Makris. We hope that in spite of the situation, the economic situation today, following the invasion of Russia to Ukraine, which creates many problems in many sectors, we will continue our work and our activities in South Africa. And I am very encouraged that the Greek government has given special attention to Sub-Saharan Africa, and our foreign minister has visited many capitals, and we will do that even more. And we are prepared to help also in all this extroversion of the Greek economy, which is needed. Thank you very much, and I'll see you probably in another occasion, which will create. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Makris. We move to the speaker of the list that we have provided to everyone, and that will be the Ambassador of South Africa to Greece, Ms. Beryl Susulu, who is also non-resident ambassador to Cyprus, Serbia, Montenegro, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Ambassador Susulu, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mazouris, President of the Hellenic Republic Chamber, Mr. Alvin Boertes, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mr. Yanis Smithilis, Secretary General of International Economic Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic, my counterpart, His Excellency Mr. George Aravositas, Ambassador of the Hellenic Republic in South Africa, distinguished guests and esteemed presenters who will carry this virtual conference on their very broad shoulders. It was earlier this year that Mr. Mazouris invited me to their annual pizza cutting event with the board of the African Hellenic Chamber, and during our deliberations informed me of the idea of a virtual conference on trade and investment opportunities in South Africa. I was enthusiastic in my support for such an initiative because I was cognizant of the fact that Africa had become a priority for Greece, and it is imperative that we at the embassy take full advantage of every opportunity accorded to us to promote our country and bring awareness of all opportunities that it could offer to potential partners. My conviction about the importance of this virtual webinar was later amplified during my meeting with Minister Nikos Dendias, who bemoaned the low levels of trade and investment flows between our countries, and was greatly pleased when I informed him of this webinar and the positive outcomes that it could present to us. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar takes place at a time when the Hellenic Republic, particularly the Foreign Ministry, is focusing on Africa. We have seen Minister Dendias' energetic engagement of fellow African countries in the past few months. Most importantly for us, the webinar takes place when we are waiting to host Minister Dendias in South Africa in the not so distant future, as an official visit has already been slated by the minister. I would like to conclude by thanking Mr. Mazuris and the board of the Chamber for this collaboration, which is a clear indication of the close ties between South Africa and Greece. The importance of these ties is, of course, also clearly demonstrated by the presence of my principal, Deputy Minister Alvin Boertes, today. I am hopeful that through the informative presentations, we will have a fruitful engagement with tangible outcomes for South Africa and the Hellenic Republic. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sisulu. It was quite noted the importance that we're trying to find out through meetings of this kind in order to enhance the bilateral relations between South Africa and Greece. And I would like now to welcome Mr. Alvin Boertes, South African Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, that he will give us a short speech on bilateral and multilateral relations and trade evolution, particularly focused for South Africa and Greece. Mr. Alvin Boertes, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Program Director, Messenger Mavrides, Ambassador George Avrovositas, Ambassador Beryl Sisulu, the President of the Hellenic Chamber of Business, Messenger Mosoris, business chambers and associations, distinguished guests, created for this wide array of representatives from both the South African and Greece business community. Evidently, Program Director, it is significant because I think both Greece and South Africa is recalibrating its economic fortunes after the transnational COVID-19 pandemic. And I think this will surely fortify our bilateral diplomatic relations. What is important, Program Director, is that having hindsight for the COVID-19 pandemic, South Africa, together with India, have put forward a proposal to the WTO to, at a temporary manner, waive the intellectual property rights to allow the local vaccines production for your more underdeveloped South. So we are seized with that matter, and I think the enhanced production pharmaceutical capabilities that South Africa has demonstrated surely is an opportunity, obviously, for the Greek business, the Greece business community, to maximize the flotation from our economic diplomacy is concerned. Importantly, Chairperson, I think you are aware that Greece has applied to become a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the period 2025 to 2026. As South Africa, we unequivocally support this candidacy of Greece, having a conscious obligation to ensure that those that occupy seats in this very prominent organ of the United Nations actually have very clear shared value systems with South Africa, and we think that it is going to be able to ensure that there's enhanced relationships between Greece and Turkey, for example, Turkey and Cyprus and the entirety of the region is concerned. I think importantly, Chairperson, we as South Africa encourage the implementation and development of confidence building measures that will bring the Greek and Turkish Cypriot communities together closer in relation to what we call, common value system. And we are supporting the negotiations in the efforts to bring about a lasting agreement based on bi-zonal, bi-communal federal state with two equal parts. So we will remain seized with the matter, and we'll continue to build, obviously, on our bilateral relationship. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, South Africa are committed to the multilateralism, to international peace, to minimize, obviously, the effects of climate change. And evidently, Chairperson, I think it's important that this discussion should obviously reflect on the quite significant financial commitments that has been made to assist South Africa to bring about a more just transition in terms of the green economy. I think all the businessmen and women and the chambers and association will appreciate that we are readying ourselves to prepare for the COP27 that will be convened in El Sheikh in Egypt. But we are still seized with our multilateral financial partners to ensure the key details on the financial symmetry to bring about our just transition are actually properly dissected. But we think it's an important opportunity for engagement for those companies that are within the green technology space. And I think we would want to invite them to have quite significant discussions with our economic advisory unit located in the presidency. Chair, I must indicate, like Ambassador Sisulu have related earlier on, that we see the efforts of the Greece Minister Nikos Dendias as complementary to bring about an expansion of the diplomatic and to deepen the diplomatic footprint of Greece and to bring about very key, opportunity dividends for the business communities from Greece and South Africa. And obviously, we are supporting that efforts. And I'm saying so, Mr. Antonio Mavrides, because the President of South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa, have announced an investment drive of 1.2 trillion rand over a period of 5 years. And what we can record is that we have achieved 95% of that very ambitious target. So there is significant FDIs inflows into South Africa. And we think it established a firm footprint, for the forward-looking community from Greece to partner with the South African business community to deepen, our manufacturing base and to bring about industrialization. And I'm raising it because there's probably the biggest opportunity Program Direct in South Africa today, as opposed to before COVID-19 pandemic, is that we have commenced with the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which encompasses 54 states of Africa, which has been rectified by 43 states. And I'm raising it because I think it's a significant matter. I want to just cite two statistics so that I think the Greece business associations, men and women, will be able to be adequately canvassed to bring about more opportunities in this space. In 2021, for the very first time, our exports to Africa have exceeded our exports to the EU. Chair, our exports to the EU stood at 355 billion rand, and our exports to the rest of Africa stood at 385 billion rand. So that's significant in relation to what the African Free Trade Agreement could present to the bilateral economic trading partners to South Africa. And we obviously want to use this as an opportunity to deepen dialogue with the business associations and chambers. As I conclude, Chair, apart from the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, South Africa has preferential access to both the EU and the United States. We remain the only country in Africa with a strategic partnership with the EU, and through the EU SACUM Economic Partnership Agreement, we have a free trade agreement in place that allows for commonality in terms of preferential access to the EU and South Africa and each other's market. Secondly, Chair, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, is a unilateral offer from the US to access the American market offered to African countries. It then holds, Chairperson, that South Africa, we regard ourselves as the gateway for opportunity dividend to Grace, and we use this opportunity to obviously invite the business community to deepen our bilateral relations. Thank you very much.
Deputy Minister Alvin Botha, thank you very much. That was a very, very interesting reference to our relations letters that South Africa is having and the standings that go to the various organizations, plus the very interesting thing about the position of South Africa into the issues that Greece is challenged at the moment, and also with the position that South Africa has got for Greece's position to the United Nations Security Council. I think the Greek representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the ambassadors of Greece in South Africa and Mrs. Sisulu in Athens will take notice of all these things that South Africa is promoting in bilateral relations. And also what is important, and it's been noticed, is that although up to now the #1 business partner, trading partner for South Africa, it was the European Union. I see that Africa now is overcome that by a little, but still now Africa is the most important trading partner. And that is a signal that South Africa can be used as a gateway for the rest of Africa for the Greek interests. Thank you very much. And now we going on to Mr. Ioannis Mirlis, the Secretary General of the Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs for International Economic Affairs and President of Enterprise Greece and Greek Organization for Investment and Trade, similar to the Invest South Africa. Mr. Mirlis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mavridis. Your Excellency, Deputy Minister, Your Excellency Ambassadors, dear President of the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to warmly thank you for your kind invitation. Congratulate you, Mr. President of the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce, as well as your team for organizing this event. It is a pleasure for me to be with you, and particularly in light of the current challenging geopolitical developments, where there is a growing need for cooperation with Africa, and particularly with South Africa, a key country not only for the EU, but also for Greece. You know, we should work all together under the same rules, under international law of the sea, because this is the framework under which we should work all together for peace, stability, and development for our people. So these initiatives helps on that, helps in order to be closer and promote interaction among companies, thus creating the necessary business environment for the private sector in order to undertake the so needed market initiatives. The role of the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development, a member of European Business Council for Africa, is important. As for the past 20 to 23 years, it serves its declared purposes by promoting the economic and trade relations between Greece and African countries, supporting and consulting medium-sized enterprises in identifying business and investment opportunities in Africa, providing information on African economies, advising and facilitating African business activities in Greece, organizing briefings about Africa and individual countries, advancing and organizing trade and investment missions to African countries, and cooperating with Greek and the African diplomatic authorities, European chambers and organizations dealing with Africa, and participating in European and other programs concerning Africa. Economic cooperation is a major driving force for peace and stability. Our world is entering a new complex period. The COVID-19 pandemic is still generating a lot of uncertainty in the world economy and in many aspects in the global trade. In addition, the political instability deriving from regional armed conflicts in Africa and elsewhere, as well as the ongoing war in Ukraine, the invasion of Russia and Ukraine, are also questioning the rules-based international world order. Financial sanctions and relevant countermeasures in important countries of the world economy, disruption in trade supply chains, inflation, rising commodity prices, energy crisis, climate change, potential food and product shortages are modern challenges that both Greece and South Africa should tackle. To this end, enhanced and continuous regional and bilateral cooperation in all realms could act as a stabilizing factor. In parallel, the business communities of the two countries could greatly contribute towards this direction. Today's meeting is an excellent example of building synergies between both public and private sector of the two countries. For Greece, South Africa is a trade partner with great potential. South Africa has the second largest and most developed economy in the African continent and is a member of the G20 group. Not to mention that the stock exchange of Johannesburg is listed among the top 20 stock markets of the world. At the same time, it is used as a hub for neighboring markets. And this is proof of what His Excellency Deputy Minister said before about how they increase the influence in the neighbors on trade, like Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, Angola, Botswana, and a lot of more countries than this. According to Greek Statistical Authority, Elstat data, Greek exports, on the other hand, in 2021, recovered and reached 74.5 million euro, increased by 32.4% compared to 2020, while our imports amounted to 76.8 million euro, with an increase of 25.4%. Greece recorded a deficit of 2.3 million euro in the bilateral trade in 2021. In the past, Greek investments have been made in South Africa in the following sectors: commercial banking services, games and services, production of plastics, winery, production of ice cream, production of commercial refrigeration appliances, production of aluminium products, shipping services, installation of photovoltaic systems, technology services, waste management. On the other hand, South African companies are interested in making investments and collaborating with Greek stakeholders, especially in the fields of pharmaceuticals. After a period of investments stagnation, those recent developments are very encouraging, but there is ample room for improvement. Bilateral economic and trade relations must be further developed. There are business opportunities in port infrastructure, environmental equipment and technologies, construction, medical equipment, and pharmaceuticals. Our goal for Greece is to become an important economic, trade, and investment partner of South Africa by creating synergies and encouraging cooperation in sectors where both countries have comparative advantages, complementarity, and mutual benefit. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are well aware, the Greek economy is on the road to post-COVID recovery with rapid economic growth rate. In particular, Greece's economy is expected to grow at a robust of 3.5% rate, following a better than expected rebound in 2021, which represents one of the fastest growth rates in Europe. Moreover, Greece also saw record foreign direct investment in 2021, reaching 5 billion euro and marking the largest FDI inflow since 2002, confirming that our country is on the right track and in a dynamic growth phase. Greece is rated also among the top 10 investment destinations in Europe. This fact reflects the wide range of attractive opportunities available in the Greek market, as well as the coordinated efforts of the last several years to create a competitive and positive business-friendly environment. The Greek economy is moving towards a new era. Substantial reforms have been implemented. Both investment and exports are now being supported by the Greek government. Economic diplomacy provides all the necessary tools for those interested in doing business in Greece, as well as in exporting goods and services. At the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we attach great importance both in supporting exports and promoting investments. That's why we incorporated under a single and coherent structure all competent units for economic extroversion. Furthermore, we established the gateway of extroversion. Enterprise Greece and the Export Credit Greece are the two main flexible support bodies for extroversion that are currently under the supervision of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. By integrating those extroversion structures in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we're aiming at the best coordination and exploitation of the available resources. Our will is to support Greek companies to strengthen their export activity. Amid the pandemic, Enterprise Greece adapted really fast to the new conditions and activated all the digital tools so as to train Greek exporters and acquire the necessary supplies for a successful digital presence on the global electronic platforms, taking advantage of EG's relevance, know-how, and experience. In the area of export credit insurance, we restructured the institutional framework of ECIO in order to provide a series of new products to ensure both exports and technical projects in new markets on very competitive terms. Exporters shall take advantage of all these new trade opportunities. At the same time, we take full advantage of the existing network of the 60 offices of economic and commercial affairs of the Greek embassies in 51 countries, which are by definition the antennas of our system abroad. Establishing bonds worldwide, we facilitate the internationalization of Greek companies in foreign markets by promoting cooperation, common values, and a closer understanding between different peoples and cultures. At this point, I would like also to mention the National Strategy for Extroversion that constitutes a tangible product of our new perception of economic diplomacy. The National Strategy for Extroversion integrates all actions of relevant stakeholders of both public and private sectors, ministries, chambers, associations, and unions. The National Strategy for Extroversion includes 670 actions for 2022, with specific action per country and per sector, covering all realms of economic diplomacy. Specifically, South Africa is among our target countries. Having said that, I would like to thank the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development for its constructive cooperation so far, which we expect that it will be continued. Ladies and gentlemen, there is great potential of collaboration between our countries for both Greek and South African entrepreneurs. The Greek Ministry of Foreign Affairs is willing and ready to support all efforts in order to help entrepreneurship go even further and to make investments and trade flourish as well. I wish the best for this event and to have even more, dear President, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Smirlis. Thank you, Mr. Smirlis, and much appreciated for your inputs, and which I believe that everybody is taken full cognizance and noted. Now I would like to move to the Greek ambassador in South Africa, Mr. Aravostas. Mr. Aravostas is the resident ambassador of Greece to South Africa, and he is known resident ambassador to Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Mozambique, and Namibia. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Good evening from Pretoria. First of all, my warmest greetings to all participants in today's webinar, especially our Secretary General for International Economic Relations, Mr. Smirlis, and of course, the Honorable Minister, Alvin Botes, and my South African counterpart. Congrats to good friend Sotiris Moussouris and his associates at the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce for one more excellent initiative. A real pleasure for me, almost 6 months after the assumption of my duties in Pretoria, to participate in this webinar. The first in many, I hope, that is aimed to bring our two countries closer with the use of modern technology. It is true that the pandemic has been a challenge for all of us, but now that travel restrictions have been lifted, we can again work closely to redefine and enhance our relations in many sectors, including the economy and specifically the bilateral trade and investments. In my so-farm term of duty, as well as back to the 90s, when I was posted in the Western Cape, I never stopped meeting with business people, mainly of Greek origin, and the common wish expressed was the same. We need to show the world, and in particular, the entrepreneurial community in Greece, the attractiveness of South Africa for serious investments. Today, more than ever before, South Africa is blessed to provide numerous advantages, such as suitable infrastructure, variety of resources, comparatively low labor costs, and extended maritime access. All these, together with economic and political stability, constitute a bright picture of a place that knows very well to reward the serious investor. Let us not forget also the strategic significance of a country that is a main member of many regional and other organizations, such as BRICS, SADC, SACU, etc. And of course, at the same time, is the main gateway to sub-Saharan Africa. Integrated efficiently in the worldwide economic network represents a vast market with business opportunities in many sectors where Greek entrepreneurs can traditionally focus. Food industry, pharmaceuticals, green and renewable energy, real estate, constructions, and of course, tourism, which has recently reopened after almost 2 years in limbo. The links between the two countries are historical and very strong due to the common devotion in the ideals of freedom and democracy, and of course, due to the long presence of a large and very dynamic Greek community in South Africa, very much business-orientated as well. Finally, the best proof of the true willingness of both sides to advance towards progress is, I believe, today's appearance of so many high-level participants in this very interesting webinar. Thank you.
My dear Yorgo, the Chamber and myself are delighted to have you in that post. You are the right man in the right place. We're looking forward to our close cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moussouris. Thank you, Ambassador Vostas, for your inputs. And we would like to move forward. And without further ado, there is the representatives of 3 organizations that we said the webinar is under their auspices. And we would like them to introduce their organization with a brief greeting. Starting with Mrs. Vicky Makrigianni, who is a senior advisor and expert ready of the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises. Mrs. Makrigianni.
Thank you, Mr. Mavridis. Your Excellencies, dear guests from South Africa, dear participants, on behalf of SEF, the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises, I would like also to thank the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development, our partner in Sub-Saharan Africa, for hosting today's meeting on business opportunities in South Africa. I will not take much of your time. I'm sure the experts from South Africa will cover all trade and investment issues. I would just like to mention that in November 2017, we have organized a business mission together with the Hellenic African Chamber, a very successful mission to South Africa. We had with us 12 Greek companies from different sectors and with extensive experience and presence in global markets, which have made many B2B meetings while during our stay in South Africa, and the results were very, very positive. Our host at the time was the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which you'll see it's further on in the program, with which we have signed an MOU. And one of the clauses mentioned reciprocal visits. So we're looking forward to receiving a delegation from South Africa to examine further the prospects for investments and joint cooperation in many areas that the Greek economy has a comparative advantage, like the infrastructure, energy, construction, building materials, agricultural products, and pharma. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all success.
Thank you, dear Ms. Makrigianni. And now moving to the representative of the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Nikos Vasiliou, who is a member of the executive board and responsible for international relations of the Athens Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Vasiliou, you have the floor. Mr. Vasiliou, can you hear us? Now, please unmute.
Okay. Now it's okay. Your Excellencies, for dear President, dear friends, on behalf of the Athens Chamber of the Commerce and Industry, I would like to welcome of you and thank you for the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development for organizing today information meetings of business operations in South Africa. Today's event aims to exploring possibility and further cooperation between Greece and South Africa on mutually beneficial terms of the both countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the Athens Chamber of Commerce and Industry is the leading chamber in Greece with more than 100,000 active members representing the whole spectrum of the enterprises. A principal concern of our chamber is to explain the extrovert character to Greek companies. Along this line, a thought. HCCI organized training mission aboard receive foreign training mission from all the world and organization seminars, workshop with a view development the bilateral relations with other countries. One of those actions is today's conference about the business opportunity in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, it is worth serving that South Africa was a major reception center for Greek immigrants, and especially during the mid of 20th century. The largest Greek communities in Johannesburg, following the Cape Town, Pretoria, and Durban, are about 40,000 people. Also, there is an agreement of cultural cooperation between Greece and South Africa. Regarding our economic relation, the trade balance between our countries turned negative for Greece in 2020 and 2021, and this considered very poor. There is great potential for further improvement in our trade relations. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to assure you that our chamber, as the biggest chamber in Greece, will continue to work in close cooperation with Hellenic African Chamber, in order to develop our bilateral relations in all countries in Africa. Thank you for all the attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vassiliou, for your contribution to this webinar. And now we're moving on with Mr. Panagiotis Hassapis, who is the Executive Vice President of the Greek Exporters Association of Northern Greece. Mr. Hassapis, the floor is yours for a brief greeting.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, honorary guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of SEVE, Greek Exporters Association, I would like to thank you all for attending today's virtual conference and to congratulate once again the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development for another important initiative hosting this event. During the past 2 years, we have co-hosted and participated in more than 5 events regarding the enhancement of the bilateral trade and investment between Greece and the African countries. And our interest in doing business with Africa is constantly rising because of the prospects of the African economy and local enterprises. And through these webinars, we can figure out the way of doing so. South Africa is one of the most important countries in Africa. As a matter of fact, it is the second largest economy and the 6th largest in terms of population in the continent. And in the past, South Africa was a major reception center for Greek immigrants, especially during the mid-20th century, while today it is estimated that more than 45 Greeks live in the country, mostly in Johannesburg, Cape Town, Pretoria, and Durban. Greece and South Africa have agreed a cooperation in cultural issues, whereas our country provides development assistance to South Africa. And as far as the bilateral trade, as stated before from Mr. Smirlis, both exports and imports amounted to approximately 75 million euro in 2021, with total trade approximately 150 million euro, while in the first quarter, of 2022, the total trade amounted from 28 to 48 million euros in 2022, showing an approximately 75% increase, but half of it was due to the rise of the petroleum products. Greece's main exports to South Africa is machinery, pharmaceuticals, plastic. On the contrary, Greece imports vehicles, parts of accessories, and prepared animal fodder from South Africa. However, these amounts are really insignificant compared to the 22 billion euros European exports to South Africa, and to the total world imports of South Africa, worth almost 80 billion euros. With China, Germany, and the US, the main providers with 16, 6.5, and approximately 6 billion euros, respectively. So these figures mentioned above depict the high prospects of the South African market in the great bilateral relations and history between the two countries could ease and foster doing business for Greek exporters. So the prerequisites are there. It is needless to say that many opportunities will arise, considering the fact that Africa is the next big thing in business, and its economy is expected to grow by 6% in 2030. And during the past 2 years, we realized that the Greek exporters are capable of further expanding their business activity worldwide by reaching 40 billion euros exports in 2021. And we are focusing now on promising markets, such as South Africa, and they will ensure that they will keep growing our exports and our economy. We hope that, hoping that this webinar will be fruitful for everyone. I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hassapis. Your points have been taken, and we would like to move on. We're almost halfway through, and now we're entering the group of the main, the keynote speakers with their presentations. And please, I would like also to ask you if you have any questions, please jot them down and keep them for the session we have at the end. If there is any specific one you would like to make to any one of the previous speakers, please keep it, unless the speaker is leaving us early, and then you may want to address it there and then. But here we're going then to Mrs. Trudy Makaya. Mrs. Trudy Makaya is a South African economist who is the, please mute your, thank you. Ms. Trudy Makaya is the South African economist. She is the economic advisor to President Ramaphosa, and she will focus on economic recovery and reform in South Africa. Ms. Makaya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Program Director. And good afternoon, Deputy Minister Bottas, to the ambassadors, to Dr. Musuris, and all esteemed presenters and guests. I'm just going to take you through a quick presentation focused, as the Program Director has mentioned, on economic recovery. So I won't go too much into background, because I believe most people who are here would be quite familiar with the South African economy. But I think it's important that we cover some areas just to give a sense of where we are at the moment, and also what the opportunities for growth are. So it'll take a few minutes, but I'll just give those highlights and insights. Starting with some good news. I think as has been mentioned before, a lot of our economies have really taken a knock with the pandemic, and recovery has been, elusive. And yet we find that in the first quarter of 2022, real GDP growth came in at 1.9%, which was far higher than most expectations, given some of the developments that we've had in previous months. In 2021, the full year, our economy grew by 4.9%, very solid recovery from the pandemic, and also reflecting a lot of the policy positions that had been taken to support the economy, to put resources into the economy, and to ensure that businesses and households are able to bounce back from the pandemic. In 2020, of course, there had been a decrease of 6.4%. So if you look at that trend, we're clearly on our way to a strong performance. We now have the economy at the same size as it was pre-pandemic. And once again, that was not expected for at least another year. So we've gained the ground that we have lost. In fact, the economy is a little larger than it was before the pandemic. So we are on a great path to growth, and we're seeing green shoots across the economy. Inflation, of course, is a topical issue at the moment. We're a country that targets inflation. Our range is 3 to 6%. Our latest CPI, Consumer Price Index, reading is at 5.9%. Still quite low by global comparisons, given the numbers that we're seeing in many parts of the world. But of course, a bit of a concern in that it's reaching the upper end of the 3 to 6% target. And in response to that, we're also seeing that our interest rates are now on an upward trend. In terms of population, we have a country of 60.1 million, a very young population, 63% under the age of 35 and 67.4% urbanized. We just concluded a census, so those numbers will be updated, but it gives you a sense of the demographic opportunities that are available in a growing population, a young population growing and also quite urbanized. Logistics and digital infrastructure, most of you who would have been to South Africa would be aware that we have a very strong installed base of infrastructure. Just to give a few figures, 144 airports with paved runways. Of course, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, Kinshasa, OR Tambo would be ones that are best known and international. We have a railway network of 20,986 kilometers, which is the most extensive on the continent and possibly across the developed world. Extensive paved road network in terms of our logistics, 8 seaports, Durban, Richards Bay, East London, Bucha, PE, Cape Town, Saldanha Bay, Mossel Bay, all of them quite active and well integrated into global trade flows. Durban and Cape Town are 2 of the world's top container ports, and we also have 2 of the world's largest dry bulk ports in Richards Bay and Saldanha. And in terms of our digital infrastructure, an interesting figure, we have the highest number of secure internet servers on the continent. So a very well-established logistics base that we are continuously working to improve. Ours is a mixed economy with quite vibrant markets. So if you look at investment in the South African economy, by far the greatest proportion comes from the private sector. So 71% by 2019 of fixed investment came from the private sector. But we also have very important investments coming in from the state. So our state-owned enterprises, our public corporations like Transnet, like Eskom, are really the backbone of our network industries, and they're also significant contributors to investment. And of course, we have general government itself consistently investing in infrastructure and other sorts of fixed capital. But you get the sense of a mixed economy and one where there are different roles that are played by different segments of society. Now, if we look at sectors in terms of fixed investment spending, you'll see that if we take the 5-year period and from 2015 to 2019, just before the pandemic, and we take an average. Fixed investment activity has been dominated by transport and storage, followed by business services, electricity, renewable energy programs being a great driver of investment in electricity, also a vibrant wholesale and retail sector, and mining. And I think the other important takeaway from this picture is that it's a very diversified economy, dominated by services, but also important secondary sectors in terms of manufacturing and utilities. Now, the greatest Achilles heel, and I think the challenge that we have to resolve economically above all challenges, is that of unemployment. But I think this audience, with experiences in the Greek economy, you will relate to some of the challenges that we have in this sphere. We often get asked, why is unemployment so high in South Africa? And there are various factors. Our economy, much as I mentioned that it's diversified, but those sectors in developing countries that typically employ a lot of people, like agriculture, are very small in the South African setting. And we also find that our manufacturing has been deindustrializing. There's a lot of work that's been done to halt the deindustrialization through localization and investment, but it is a reality that manufacturing is a much smaller proportion now than it was, say, 20 years ago. We welcome investment for many reasons, but also because we want to break the concentration within our economy. We have economic activity. In many sectors, you'll find that there's 3 or 4 firms that dominate, sometimes even 2 or even a monopoly. And small business and new entrants often struggle to get into those sectors. And this is a problem for unemployment because it is usually smaller businesses that tend to employ most people. Given the legacy of apartheid, I think we had very warm, welcoming words earlier on, just alluding to that history of apartheid, but it also still expresses itself in the spatial distribution of economic activity. We find that we still have economic activity concentrated in key urban areas, and even within those urban areas, concentrated to what would have been historically white areas. So quite an important agenda to ensure that we can diversify the spread of our economic activity. We're also working on our regulations, which sometimes can be quite tough on small business in particular. We're also working on transaction costs in the economy, our network industries like telecoms, logistics, electricity. We have to make sure that we get those costs down. And of course, skills. We have a lot of work to do to make sure that we can get our young people, because this is a particularly young economy with high levels of youth unemployment. We have to find ways to ensure that they get the skills that are required. And we often talk to investors to say it's well and good to have investment plans, but also think about how you're going to impart skills and training to the population. Now, just to give an update on the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, this was the plan that President Ramaphosa led society, business, civil society, labor unions to come up with a consolidated plan, which was discussed in one of our forums called NEDLEC as a joint whole of society approach towards economic reconstruction and recovery in the face of the pandemic. Now, the plan had various pillars. I won't go into detail on some of them, but I'll give feedback on some key areas. But if we look at the priority interventions, there were really 8 pillars to the plan: infrastructure investment, energy security, the presidential employment stimulus, strategic localization, industrialization, and export promotion. We also had a pillar looking at tourism recovery and growth, understanding that tourism, of course, was taken out in terms of really having suffering under lockdowns and global restrictions. When Omicron came on, we also had South Africa being frozen out of international markets. But we still have to maintain our tourism businesses and to ensure that they're poised to take advantage of the return of business and leisure tourism. So an important pillar was tourism, the green economy, acknowledging that as a flip side to energy security, we also have to move on towards looking at more climate-friendly ways of doing things. Of course, not just in energy, but also in transport, in industry, in agriculture, in many other areas. Responding to the challenge of climate change also brings its own economic opportunities. We also had food security as a pillar. And here government did work to support subsistence farmers. But this was also underpinned by a very extensive package of social measures, income protection measures. For the first time, we had a grant that was given to unemployed adults who don't have any other source of income to ensure that they're able to meet their basic needs and that we don't have concerns around hunger, given the severity of the economic contraction. So food security, an important pillar, also important for stimulating the agricultural sector. And the eighth pillar, we had gender equality and economic inclusion, once again, through our various tools, including state procurement, ensuring that women have a fair share of economic gains. Now, there were various enablers that underpin this. Fiscal sustainability being very important because we went into the pandemic with a high debt burden, relatively high for an emerging market, and it was important that we get that back under control. There was a time when it seemed as if we're heading towards 100% debt to GDP ratio, and we managed to stay away from that. And in the last budget, I think the latest figures were about 79%. So fiscal sustainability important, while at the same time ensuring that we support households and businesses as they deal with current challenges. Regulatory changes to enable growth. I spoke earlier about the importance of lowering transaction costs within the economy. This is good for business activity, but it's also good for ensuring that we have the kind of growth that would generate jobs. So despite this being difficult times, there's quite an ambitious program of regulatory and structural reforms that will unlock opportunities within the economy. Building a capable state, always an important priority to ensure that we're able to deliver services efficiently and that we are able to sustain investments. This has become very important also at local government, where there have been interventions at district level to ensure that investors, wherever we find them, even if it's in the most remote part of the country, receive an acceptable level of service. And of course, the community is also served in doing so. Economic diplomacy and African integration has also been important. I think Deputy Minister spoke to that statistic about increasing prominence of African trade in our trade basket. It's our continent, we're here, and it's been very strange that African countries trade more, far more externally and with very, very low levels of intra-African trade. And so we're working to enhancing African integration, but it doesn't mean moving away from the world. In fact, it means that the world, investors, exporters are able to address a much bigger market of greater scale when they engage with our continent. And finally, as I mentioned, skills development, always an important underpin of all that we do, because we see that we have young people who are keen to learn, but often the sectors that generate growth require a different skills profile from what they have. And so we need to bridge that gap. Now, if I just go through some of the achievements in recent times over the past few months of the structural reform program, because a lot of investors are often concerned about this. They say we want to come and invest in South Africa and base ourselves there, but what is happening with your reforms? So if I just quickly go through what we've accomplished over the past few months, we've had a challenge of spectrum not being allocated for a long time in the telecoms industry. Mobile operators have been saying we need more spectrum. If we have more spectrum, we can give faster internet, we can lower our costs, we can just give a much better service. And so finally, they've been able to have access to new spectrum bands that they didn't have access to. And the spectrum was concluded. The regulator, the telecoms regulator, ICASA, and one of the operators, Telkom, also bringing finality any legal challenges that were outstanding. And so in the next months and years, we should see some of that spectrum being deployed and telecommunications costs going down across the country. Of course, the spectrum auction in itself also brought some revenues to the state. On renewable energy, we had an amazing path-breaking, innovative renewable energy program starting about 10 years ago, but then it stalled. And so, for those who are in this sector, the different bid windows where capacity is being, where players are asked to bring capacity to the grid. And so we've resuscitated that program, and now bid window 5 has actually been, the preferred bidders have been announced, and they are working towards reaching financial close so that they're able to finalize their contracts and start building. Bid window 6 has also been opened, and that will bring on additional power. We also know that there was a risk mitigation round, which was more of an emergency round, and 3 of the bidders from that round have also concluded their agreements and will be bringing power to the grid. So renewable energy story being once again prominent, and a lot of activity happening here. And the regulators working with the presidency, working with the Department of Minerals and Resources and Energy, finding ways to remove any barriers that might be outstanding in terms of ability to bring those projects to finality.
Ms. Magaya, sorry to interrupt this very interesting presentation, and especially in this particular slide that we're watching. Can we have 2 additional minutes to round up your presentation? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. No, that's fine. We're also working to on our electricity market. We've just published an electricity regulation amendment bill, and the real key takeaway there is that we're opening the way to a competitive market which will accommodate multiple generators of energy on a fair playing field. We've also published a national rail policy, and the key development there is that we've had a request for proposals to have private players bid for running slots on the freight rail network. We're also revisiting our water quality and bringing back measures like the Green Drop Report. And I think here it's investors in municipalities who really want assurance that they're getting water and also quality water. And we've also revised our critical skills list, a key tool for migration to ensure that the critical skills that are reflected there talk to the needs of the economy. Deputy Minister Boertes spoke about the just transition, so I won't get into detail about that. Just to say that we're very ambitious on renewable energy, but also on green hydrogen and also on electric vehicles, because we do produce automotives. We just need to make that leap towards hybrid and electric vehicles. And the deal that we clinched on the sidelines of COP26 is just the beginning. And I think the key message here is that investors from all over the world, including Greek investors, can see this as a platform through which they can also participate in some of the projects that will come into bear. This is the seed financing, but there's a whole lot of work to be done in these 3 areas: renewable energy, electric vehicles, green hydrogen, and we see them as important growth areas. Finally, infrastructure. I just want to highlight the infrastructure fund, which is a blended financing vehicle where the state puts in money, but also the private sector puts in money. There's a pipeline of projects that have been worked on student accommodation, social housing, telecoms, water and sanitation, and transport. It's publicly available in terms of the projects that have been gazetted, but there you can also see opportunities for contributing to the infrastructure story. So let me leave it there, and I look forward to questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Makaya, and I'm sure that there will be interactions on your presentation. Now we're moving on to our next speaker, which is Ms. Razmi Raghavan, from a senior manager of Invest South Africa, which is, I would say, the equivalent of Enterprise Greece in South Africa. Ms. Raghavan, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon to everybody, to the deputy ministers, your excellencies, the audience and fellow entrepreneurs, the chambers of commerce and associations that are on the call, and also fellow presenters that are also making presentations. Just a few remarks that I will be making on the role of Investment South Africa and what they actually do, and also how opportunities are presented to Greek companies to place investments and a presence and a footprint in South Africa, as well as trade with South Africa itself. Within the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, we are one of the divisions called Investment South Africa. And at the level of firm, we engage with the companies to understand their businesses. And whilst we are one of the divisions, a number of other branches that we have, 9 other branches that could impact on your business. And so whilst we are the first point of contact or the first port of entry for companies wanting to invest in the country, we are certainly looking to engage with companies that want to further expand or even place their manufacturing facilities or their offices in the country. And through the strategic engagements and a framework of strategic engagements, provide the information to the companies and also and hold them through the different spheres of government, as well as the divisions within the department that can provide information in building and strengthening their business case to place their investments in the country itself. And so when you look at, some of the other divisions that we have within the department that impact on your business or that will have an impact on your business, we have a unit that deals with trade policy, negotiations and cooperation. And this is really about facilitating development by strengthening trade and investment links with key economies and fostering the African development, but also including regional and continental integration and developmental cooperation. Through our spatial industrial development and economic transformation, it's really about using the locations and instruments within the department to place your investments. So when it comes to location, we have instruments such as the special economic zones and industrial parks to place your investments in, but also through the special economic zones, we have a suite of incentives that can reduce the cost of doing business itself. We also have the industrial competitiveness and growth branch, and they really all about the designing and implementing of policies, strategies, and programs for the development of manufacturing and related economic sectors. And they contribute to the direct and indirect creation of jobs, value addition, and competitiveness in both the domestic and the export markets. Of course, through reimagining our economy, we also have developed master plans, and these particular plans for the sectors bring together the different role players that are impacting on the value chain, also bring the industry together to be able to develop targeted interventions that are making a more conducive environment to place investments on, but also to be able to provide a value of what those type of investments could be and identify the impediments that would hinder those implementations of those projects. And through the advocacy role that we play at Invest SA, we are able to then advocate for certain changes and reforms and also input into the direction of these policies and programs. You also have the Consumer and Corporate Regulation Division. This is really about developing and implementing coherent, predictable, and transparent regulatory solutions that facilitate easy access to redress the efficient regulation for economic citizens itself. We have a unit that looks after industrial financing. Of course, for any company that's looking at investments, they are looking at how to blend their financing with their own financing, but what the government could also provide in terms of financing. And then when it comes to companies that have set up manufacturing facilities in producing the products and services for the domestic market, there's also the need and the look to external markets and access to other markets across the continent and the globe. And this allows us to then interact with our export development promotion and outward investments, which has the ability to identify exporters. And we do see on the program, there are a number of exporters, including an exporters association. So we're happy to facilitate those engagements. We also have the Competition Commission, Competition Policy and Economic Planning. And as Ms. Makaya has indicated, it's really to provide that conducive environment so that you have fair competition with the number of companies that are involved in producing and manufacturing in the various sectors that impact on the economy itself. We have an Economic Research and Coordination Division that looks at how do we develop interventions to increase the competitiveness in the economy itself. And of course, inward investment attraction, facilitation, and aftercare. It really supports foreign direct investment flows, promotes domestic investment by providing the hand-holding process as well as a one-stop shop for investment promotion, investment facilitation, and aftercare support to the investors itself. And as you've heard, in the last few years, we've seen a number of developments that have happened that have impacted, that have brought disruptions to supply chains, that has also placed our economies on a different path. And so it's placing the South African economy on that new trajectory. And this requires that we are supporting a massive growth in local production, in making South African products and exporting much more competitive. And whilst there are huge opportunities through these opportunities that have been created by the disruptions that have happened in the economy, through the effective partnerships, and that's what we really want to do. We want to be able to develop those effective partnerships, those targeted deployment of resources, and the right policies to be able to attract the investment into the country itself. So when it comes to the core focus, and obviously since COVID has also placed our economy on a different trajectory, there have been a number of developments and a number of new entrants into the economy itself. And so 4 high-level interventions have been identified to support these increasing levels of investments, have been to support the recovery plan, to support the growing of the economy itself. And this is really the massive rollout of infrastructure throughout the country. It's the rapid expansion of the energy generation capacity. It's the employment stimulus, as has been indicated, and a drive for industrial growth. And the drive for industrial growth are not being developed through our master plans and through interventions through the master plans, but also through the presidential investment mobilization drive. In being able to attract more investment into the country, we are able to not only create more jobs, but we are also able to build and continue to increase and enhance the manufacturing and production capability, thus allowing for the transfer of skills and the transfer of technology by the partners. So a number of Greek companies could play a big role in that, in being able to bring technology transfer, in being able to bring the skills, and also in being able to partner with South African-owned companies to be able to not only increase the investment, but also expand on the investment whilst determining the mode of investment that one wants to come into the country with. A number of modes that exist are through mergers and acquisitions, depending on the type of investor and depending on what resource you are looking at and depending on what you want to achieve in the market itself. But a vital part of growing this industrialization effort has resulted in a number of master plans already being developed, as well as some in the development phase. And so master plans that have already been completed and are already being implemented include the automotive industry, the sugar industry, the poultry industry, the clothing and textiles industry, the global business services. Some of those that are under implementation and under development continue to be the furniture master plan and the healthcare master plan. And in terms of healthcare, which is a priority for both countries, we see a number of opportunities, which I'm sure my colleague from Aspen will also further elaborate on. But what we've seen since COVID is that a number of opportunities, both in the pharmaceutical sector as well as the medical devices sector, has emerged, whereby even new entrants and new emerging trends and new sectors or sub-segments of the sectors have been developed. And it's through these particular partnerships that we've been having more companies expand and partner with South African companies as part of an expansionary flow to be able to expand their investments and build capacity and capability in the country itself. In terms of the investment mobilization drive, you would have already heard that we've reached 95% of the target in terms of the 1.2 trillion investment target itself. And this has also allowed for imported products to be substituted, high level of localization, and certainly in the ICT, the agro-processing, the industry, the healthcare industry, the data services, and automotive, we've seen a number of investments where the companies have continued to increase their investments in the country itself. When it comes to the energy sector, as we've indicated, that through the generation of energy,
η Μακάγια ήταν που μίλησε. Ήταν η σύμβουλος του κυρίου Ραματόζα που μίλησε λίγο παραπάνω. Τώρα αυτή είναι στο δεκάλεπτο, δεν είναι.
Νομίζω σβήστε το μικρόφωνο. Το μικρόφωνο είναι ανοιχτό.
Sorry.
No problem. I'm almost completed with my remarks. When we come to the energy sector, as has been indicated previously, this brings a huge amount of opportunities in terms of the energy sector, especially around small-scale embedded generation, utility-scale renewable energy, the energy storage, hydrogen, electric vehicles, and batteries. All of these particular sub-segments within the energy sector provide an opportunity for partnerships. And we have a division, a partnership through the Department of Minerals and Energy, as well as a directorate within Invest SA that can handhold you through the processes and also provide advice and introduce you to some of the key role players that impact on your business in understanding that business and the opportunities further itself. On the automotive sector, we also have a number of opportunities, especially in terms of localization, but especially in terms of developing the tier 2s and tier 3s through the master plan itself. And so we're finding components being further developed and partnered with local companies to be able to expand on those partnerships itself. And we also find that in the healthcare, we've seen a number of developments in the healthcare sector. We've seen during COVID localization of protective equipment. We've seen diagnostic kits that are now being developed by South African companies. We've seen gloves, sanitizers, aprons, and even ventilators through the expertise and coming together of a number of industries being able to produce this not only for local consumption, but also for international consumption as well. We've also seen recent developments such as the launch of the Center of Excellence in Stellenbosch, focused on research, innovation, and development. We've seen the BioVac Afrigen and network of universities establishing the first COVID mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub. And we've also seen strategic alliances between Johnson & Johnson and Aspen, BioVac and Pfizer, and some of the local companies that have come into the sector itself. And so we're seeing that these opportunities in the various sectors have created opportunities for the companies that may want to come into the country. Of course, with the limited time that we do have, it's very difficult sometimes to expand on every single sector, but I will share with Anthony a few slides that spell out what I've spoken of, including the key contact details of the different institutions.
Mr. Gavan, just to say that we've gone over the time allocated, and if you have a slide presentation, I think we should give it to the chamber so that we can pass it on to our members to have a look and be informed further on that. Will you be able to round it up now?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, and apologies for going over time. But this is certainly, an exciting investment, when it comes to South Africa and what it has to offer. So we definitely would want to handhold you through the process of navigating through the different spheres of government when making decisions about your investments. And we do believe South Africa is positioned to take those investments forward. We're really your partner in taking those conversations forward. I want to thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and we're looking forward to possible questions and answers in our Q&A session. And now we're moving on to our next speaker, which is Ms. Bernadette Zwela from the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamber at the JCCI for Head of International Trade. Mrs. Zwela, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, all distinguished guests, Program Director, Ambassador, Deputy Minister Boertes. It is indeed a great honor to be part of this event today. The Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we were established in 1890, and we're also part of the International Chamber of Commerce in Paris. So we have access to 14,000 chambers globally. JCCI is also part of the Association of South African chambers, where all the major chambers like Cape Town, Durban, Pietermaritzburg, Midlands, Middelburg, Ladysmith, Durban, and several other chambers, we formed this association where we could collectively look at local issues and also international issues. On the local side, we look at infrastructure, we look at electricity or water, and then we engage with specialists that will look at these issues. We'll do a survey, and then we will lobby with the government on behalf of our members as well. So we play a very key part in representing businesses and lobbying businesses with the government as well. JCCI was founded in 1890. It is an independent, non-political, subscription-based association dedicated to promoting an environment conducive to good business. Members are drawn from every sector of the economy and range in size from small entrepreneurs to the blue chip listed corporations. As the leading business association in the region, JCCI has been proactive in advocating for progress and change in the city and the province. As an impartial third party, the Chamber links established business, the emerging sector, and government at all levels. As the voice of business for the region, it lobbies on business issues ranging from domestic to international matters. JCCI is recognized as a key player in the promotion and facilitation of international trade. JCCI provides a platform for our members to engage on the international arena. So we arrange 2 to 3 international events where the High Commissioner or the Ambassador will give an overview of the bilateral trade opportunities. We will then invite a logistics company, a financial institution to talk through the trade cycle. And then we will also invite 1 or 2 companies operating in that region and just talking through their challenges and their opportunities. And in fact, JCCI also signed an MOU with the Hellenic African Chamber of Commerce and Development, and we look forward to also escalating business and also looking at various opportunities as well. JCCI is recognized as the key player in the promotion and facilitation of international trade. It is the first port of call for visiting trade missions and foreign delegates, enabling it to open the doors to new business opportunities for many members. JCCI is also very strategically placed as with Gauteng being the economic engine for Africa, we're very strategically placed for businesses to actually set up their factories or offices in Johannesburg and then reaching into the rest of Africa as well. The Chamber also organizes outward selling missions for members who benefit greatly from having pre-arranged business-to-business meetings in the markets visited. JCCI workshops and seminars cover doing business in various countries, the complexities of exporting and importing, and the latest legislation affecting business. Workshops highlighting capital infrastructure projects in various countries and provides training on all aspects of international trade. The Chamber's international reputation for good governance and its ability to deliver results have made it the partner of choice for SME, local and international development projects, which we've worked with the German government, with Trias Belgium, and the International Trade Center. In fact, JCCI has been running developmental projects since 2002, and in 2015, JCCI was awarded a project from the German government through GIZ to run a global export accelerator where we equipped Black-owned SMEs with all the necessary export skills to export. And through this program, we would do assessment to see where the successful businesses are. Then that would then include a mentorship. We would look at packaging, sales and marketing, production, financial management, everything relating to business topics. And then we'll introduce the SMEs to export skills, Incoterms, types of delivery, payment terms. And then once the businesses are ready to export, we will do a feasibility study to identify suitable markets of entry, taking into account the free trade agreements, the harmonized tariff codes. And then from there, we have a very strong partnership with the Department of Trade and Industry. Then we'll assist businesses to attend exhibitions and trade missions. And then we will introduce the SMEs to the 14,000 chambers that we have a network with as well. And on the success of that project, GIZ awarded JCCI the project in specialized services in agri-processing. And then the next project we were awarded was the creative industries in gaming, fashion, jewelry, animation, and crafts. And on that success, we were then awarded the project and we implemented the Women in Business Desk. And 6 weeks ago, we then implemented a project in partnership with GIZ and the ASEC chambers to run the Global Export Accelerator, where we provide all the necessary skills to SMEs to export and then also provide them with access to markets as well. And I'd also just like to touch a bit on Greece and South African relations. There's an enormous potential for the development of the Greek-African relations with great benefits for both sides. Greece has political, economical, and technical cooperation with most countries in the African region at bilateral level, as well as through international organizations. Trade between South Africa and Greece has increased substantially over the last 2 years. The Greek outward investment activities in South Africa are estimated at $350 million, a figure which reportedly exceeds $700 million if investment by expatriate Greeks is taken into account as well. Such investments primarily appear to be targeted at financial services, shipping, foodstuff, manufactured products, and commerce. Greek-related investment in South Africa is estimated to be accountable directly for over plus minus 100,000 job opportunities. South Africa is a major reception center for Greek immigrants. The largest Greek communities are in Johannesburg, followed by Cape Town, Pretoria, and Durban. It is difficult to determine the precise number of Greeks due to constant comings and goings, although the estimated figure is about 45,000. There is an agreement of cultural cooperation between Greece and South Africa. South Africa's exports to Greece was $67.57 million during 2020, updated on June of 2022. Greece exports to South Africa were $88.07 million during 2021, updated on June of 22. Under the SADC EPA, the EU has fully or partially removed custom duties on 98.7% of imports from South Africa, while guaranteeing full free access for the rest of the signatory countries, Greece being one. Today, the EU remains South Africa's biggest trade and investment partner, with Greece a member of the African, Caribbean, Pacific group of countries. The Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA, will benefit both the Caribbean and Europe as it helps the two regions invest in and trade with each other, removes trade barriers, which in turn produces healthy competition in the EU market and lower prices for consumers. So that's just a brief background on the trade between South Africa and Greece. And JCCI as a chamber looks forward to strengthening our partnership, and also where we could also look at joint ventures and other partnerships with Greece as well. And we really look forward to strengthening our partnership. And thank you for giving us the opportunity today to just share briefly on the different activities at JCCI. Thank you.
We wish to thank the three ladies who spoke. Well, we have not seen them, but we appreciated the information they gave us, which is extremely valuable. I wish to tell you that all the presentations will be found in our website soon. And it will be extremely interesting for anybody who is more involved in thinking of exporting or investing in South Africa, to look at them and be advised by them. It's an extremely interesting discussion, and I thank you very, very much. And of course, you know that we have to finish soon, so I hope our Greek friends who are coming will think of the clock. Thank you very much. And Mr. Mavridis, please continue. I'm sorry for the interruption. But I want to say also that the great
thank you, Mr. Moussouris. And
the greatest resource of Africa, I used to say, is the woman of Africa. And this is proven. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moussouris. And here we're going to go forward with our next speaker, which will deal with a special sector. And I would say that of interest to Greece as well, because as it was noticed earlier, the pharmaceutical products that they exported from Greece to South Africa sort of become year after year either the first or the second most exported product from Greece to South Africa. And here we have Mr. Stavros Nicolaou, who is a Group Senior Executive for Aspen Pharmacare and Board Member of Brand South Africa and Business Unity of South Africa, the famous, they're known as BUSA. Mr. Stavros Nicolaou will have a presentation on he will focus on South Africa as an investment destination for pharmaceuticals, the bilateral trade opportunities with the continent, and South Africa as a gateway into Africa, plus the Aspen's pharmacare activities in Greece. Mr. Nicolaou, the floor is yours.
Mr. Mavridis, thank you very much. Your Excellencies, the ambassadors on both sides, the Greek and the South African ambassadors, both very hardworking and energetic ambassadors, I might say. I know both of them quite well. Distinguished business colleagues and counterparts, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to share some thoughts with you as a South African business person and where the opportunities might lie, generally speaking, and also sector specific to the pharmaceutical sector. Σας φέρνω θερμούς χαιρετισμούς σήμερα και δυστυχώς θα μιλήσω στα αγγλικά για να καταλαβαίνουμε όλοι. I'm going to cover two aspects to my presentation. I too have slides, but in the interest of time, I'm going to rather circulate the slides afterwards. Let me rather just talk what I think is a practical experience of a business person. So the first area I'd like to cover is why consider South Africa as a trade, commerce, and investment destination. Let me cover that firstly. So what would I look at as a business person if I was going to invest or going to trade in Greece or in any other market? And I should add that the company that I'm with, which I've been with for 24 years, is Africa and the Southern Hemisphere's largest pharmaceutical manufacturer, Aspen Pharmacare, as was introduced earlier. We trade in over 60 countries globally. So what I'm going to comment on is really drawn from a global experience. So what do you look for in South Africa? Firstly, we're an economy that is the size of $340 billion US. That would rank South Africa as the 32nd biggest economy globally. My understanding is the Greek economy is around 240 billion, if I'm not mistaken at last count. And interestingly, South Africa represents 14% of the entire African GDP. We are the country on the African continent that hosts the highest number of multinational companies. And I think that is a very important message because multinationals look at a particular governance, a particular infrastructure before they invest. So we're very pleased that South Africa has the highest representation of multinational companies invested in the country. I've referred to strong focus on governance. We have the most sophisticated financial services sector, banking sector, not only in Africa, but globally speaking as well. We have a very active private sector. In fact, the private sector contributes 71% of fixed capital, fixed capex into the economy. And we have a very favorable, the most advanced logistics and supply chain capability on the continent. Very strong focus on a diversified economy. We have a reasonably diversified economy. I think people tend to think of South Africa as mining and commodities. That's not the case. We have a strong manufacturing sector and a strong focus, as you heard earlier from my colleagues, Trudy and Rashmi, a strong focus on localization. So attracting investment into the country to manufacture on the continent as a gateway into the African continent remains an important element. And then let me just add finally that the African Free Trade Agreement has been concluded, as you heard earlier. It's a significant opportunity for any would-be investors into South Africa and the continent. What this does is it aggregates the markets, it aggregates the volume for the African continent. So when you consider South Africa, and I had the privilege of meeting the Secretary General for Greeks abroad about 4 weeks ago, and there is a renewed focus. In fact, we met him with Deputy Minister Botha. There is a focus on Greece developing a more advanced strategy with the African Union. So business people in this audience, when you look at South Africa being a gateway into the entirety of the African continent, with a specific opportunity being the aggregation of volumes through the African Free Trade Agreement. So those are some of the things I would look at as a business person if I'm going to enter a new market, and I've given you some of the statistics as they pertain to South Africa, it's an open economy that abounds with opportunity and abounds with energy as well. Let me cover the pharmaceutical sector for a moment. That's what I've been asked to speak about, given that from what I understand, the single biggest export from Greece to South Africa is in pharmaceuticals. I can tell you the experience of my company, Aspen. Aspen has made its products available via a distributor in Greece. We have contracted companies that develop pharmaceutical intellectual property. The company is called Pharos. We deal with the Panayotou family. They are well known in the pharmaceutical space. We also, by way of corporate social investment, Aspen every year internationally, wherever it operates, carries out a Mandela Day activity on the 18th of July every year. Greece is no different. So this means we adopt every year a corporate social project. Last year, it was the upgrading of an old age home in Athens. And this year there will be another one. So we have an economic, commercial, and a social interest in Greece. And we would encourage the Greek companies to reciprocate here in South Africa with a similar approach. So the pharmaceutical sector, before I cover a few high-level points in the 10 minutes that I've got, it's worth looking at South Africa during the COVID period. So how did South Africa fare during COVID? Let me give you 5 high-level points. The first is that we were the only emerging market in the world to carry out phase 3 clinical trials for the AstraZeneca, Pfizer, and Johnson & Johnson vaccine. We were the only emerging market in the world to do that. Secondly, we were the only, we were the country in the world that carried out the largest phase 3B COVID vaccine implementation study in the whole world. There wasn't a bigger one. It was on 500,000 subjects. And of course, the data that emanated from South Africa was used to guide treatment protocols and vaccine protocols elsewhere in the world, including in Greece, of course. We carried out, thirdly, the largest phase 3B booster study. It was on 250,000 patients. And again, the world benefited from our data and our clinical trial expertise. Then fourthly, we were the first country in the world, very much often being punished for this, which is quite odd, but we were the first ones to sequence the beta variant and the Omicron variant. So we're the first country to sequence that. Of course, there are consequences when you're the first, because then everyone wants to impose travel bans on you, which is not so good. But it again demonstrates the expertise, the medical excellence that exists in South Africa. And very lastly, I'm proud to say my company, Aspen, was the first company to produce the Johnson & Johnson vaccine out of all the other partners that J&J had. And we've landed up producing the most vaccines for and on behalf of J&J, some of which incidentally would have found their way into Greece and into the European Union. So I wanted to give you a sense of how we managed the pandemic. There's a lot more I could say, but let me go on to the business opportunities in the pharmaceutical sector. So South Africa's pharmaceutical industry at manufacturer's exit price is valued at $4.2 billion. It is the largest on the African continent. It's a very sophisticated and well-developed sector. There's a public and a private sector. The public sector is a tender-based sector. It accounts for around 75% of the volume and 25% of the value of the market. and the private sector accounts for the reverse. 75% of the value, 25% of the volume. All the multinationals are well represented in South Africa. There's a strong local presence, including my company Aspen and others like Adcock Ingram and other companies. So if you are looking to partner with South African companies, then the local companies are good partners. They have a very proud and successful track record of executing supply, manufacturing, and distribution agreements on a multitude of products. And as you've probably seen by now, there is a significant cutting edge to the pharmaceutical sector in South Africa. What are the diseases that are important in South Africa? And when I talk South Africa, please consider the entirety of the African continent, because South Africa, as I said earlier, is a gateway regionally and continentally to the rest of the continent. So those areas for those pharmaceutical aspirant companies on this call that want to come into South Africa, want to partner companies like Aspen and Adcock Ingram and others, the areas that are interesting are, of course, infectious diseases, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis continue to remain a problem. And then, of course, the real opportunity now is starting to emerge in non-communicable diseases, diabetes, oncology, cancer, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, etc. Diabetes is a real problem that's emerging in South Africa on the continent. So for those companies, and Greece does have a biotech sector. So if you're into biotech, then there are opportunities in oncology, in biosimilars, in biotech products. So South Africa is open for business. The pharmaceutical sector is open for business. We'd encourage you to look more closely at South Africa when you look at emerging markets. There is a strong footprint in South Africa and can get you a footprint into the continent. Thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure to speak to you. Unfortunately, I have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, Mr. Mavridis. I will dial out in a minute, but thank you for this opportunity. Thank
you, Mr. Nicolaou. It was very valuable, your contribution, and very interesting things about the sector, pharmaceutical sector. I'm sure people will take note of all these things, and they will use probably your presentation as well to get more information on that. And please let me now carry on with our next speaker, which comes from the financial sector. It's a representative of the Standard Bank of South Africa, Mr. Kotsovoos, George Kotsovoos. And Mr. Kotsovoos will speak about perspectives on the power and infrastructure investment opportunity in Africa and South Africa, and more specifically in South Africa, where the country is facing a serious power crisis. Thank you, Mr. Kotsovoos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mavridis, ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As a proud South African Greek, I'm pleased to be able to give you a banker's perspective on the investment opportunity that exists in Africa and South Africa. Some of you may be familiar with the Standard Bank Group, but that's the company that I actually represent. Just for everybody's benefit, the bank has a shareholder in the form of ICBC, who paid over $5 billion for a 20% investment in the bank in 2007, and it gives you a sense of the interest from investors to look at South Africa and Africa more broadly as an investment destination. We have over 1,000 branches across the continent, 538 in South Africa, somewhere around there. So as you can see, the footprint is quite substantive. We have a slogan, which is that people call it Africa and we call it home. I mean, that's really what we live every day as people invested in Africa. But more specifically, I wanted to share with you some thoughts around what's happening in power and infrastructure across the continent. Public-private partnerships are definitely the flavor of the day across the continent. Most certainly in South Africa, PPPs have been pushed for quite a number of years, and I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through the presentation. But essentially what they do is allow the public and private sector to get together and invest in much needed infrastructure. In terms of the opportunity itself, you can see from the slide that the investment in sub-Saharan Africa from the private sector is quite substantive relative to domestic investment by governments themselves. The opportunity here, for example, talks to the transmission network that needs to be developed further on the continent, and you're talking about sizable amounts, in excess of 100,000 kilometers of transmission network, which is quite staggering if you think about it. And I can tell you that we're seeing a lot of interest from many players across the world who are looking to sort of come and invest in the opportunity in South Africa. But in terms of successful PPPs in the South African and African context, we've seen a lot of investment in REAP, which is the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program, which my colleagues spoke about earlier. We've seen significant investment in toll roads in South Africa. In Kenya, we're currently investing in a whole bunch of road projects. So we're seeing Portuguese and Chinese investors investing in roads. In water, we've seen investment from Spanish firms in places like Ghana. In the power sector, we've seen significant investments across the continent. Mytilineos Group, for example, Metka invested in Ghana, and we developed a relationship with them as a Greek firm in that market. And that's just one example, but we've seen a lot of other European-based firms investing across the continent as well. Just some themes to share with everybody. Generally, regulations are making it a bit more expensive for commercial banks to sort of provide long-term finance, which is needed for infrastructure. And I'm sure that's, quite relevant in Greece and Europe as well. We are, however, working with development finance institutions and export credit agencies to collaborate and to find solutions. So there's no challenge there ultimately. But themes that I'm sure everybody's familiar with: climate change is a big topic, so everybody's focusing on making sure that they meet the ESG goals and work towards identifying the relevant parameters to ensure that happens. Off-grid is a big theme, not just in globally, but also in South Africa and Africa, where because of the constraints around transmission, a lot of developers and clients are saying, well, let's actually develop power solutions on a decentralized basis, where we can actually provide mining companies, real estate entities with their own generation, so that they don't have to rely on the national grid. So that in itself is a massive opportunity, and I'll talk a bit about that as we progress, through the presentation. In terms of political risks, as a bank, we of course always focus on the sovereign-related risks that I'm sure developers and equity investors also would look at. We, of course, are very comfortable to invest in South Africa because it's a home market. In certain markets where there is political risk, we believe that we can support investors with finding the right credit risk enhancement to support the investments into those countries. So happy to have conversations with anybody who's concerned about political risks and how to mitigate it. It shouldn't be a stumbling block for investment in any African markets. And I spoke a bit about China and the investment that they're making in Africa, and it's got to speak, I suppose, to the fact that they see a massive opportunity on the continent. So then with regards to power, just to sort of share the themes, it's really about centralized and decentralized energy. We're seeing that across the board, as I mentioned. Part of it is about making sure that when you transition from coal to renewables, which is obviously a theme that is very topical in South Africa and the rest of the continent, is that you take into account, what the impact is going to be on communities and whoever else that is affected by it. Just to quickly share some themes with you, around sub-Saharan Africa. Electrification is generally quite low. It's sub 50%. So it suggests that there's a massive opportunity to invest in electrification across the continent. And quite frankly, we could have shared a slide with you on the road and rail sectors as well, where there's massive underinvestment and there's a massive opportunity to invest there as well. So I'll share the slide with everybody, all these slides with Mr. Mavridis, so I can share with the team so we don't have to go into the detail. But suffice to say that the opportunity is incredible, quite frankly, and the risks are well managed, without a doubt. So just in terms of so I just wanted to mention one thing around the themes that I sort of touched on over here. And once, one point around the investment required, and I think it's a statistic that the African Development Bank has provided in numerous publications, but there's an estimate that between 130 to 150 billion dollars is required per annum to fund infrastructure across the continent, and there's a massive deficit around that as well. So, I'm not sure how many markets there are across the world where you can look at such an opportunity to invest. And as I said, the risks are well managed. So I spoke a bit about the just energy transition. It's in South Africa. We're all focusing at the moment on transitioning from coal to renewables in due course. Circa 40% or more of, in fact, more than 40% of South Africa's current generation comes from coal. So there's a lot of pressure to transition to cleaner sort of energy sources. And that means you have to look at the communities. It means that gas to power is going to become a transition opportunity. So those developers and those companies who are looking to invest in gas should most certainly position themselves for the opportunity that's coming to the market. With regards to the balance of the opportunity, which my colleagues also spoke about earlier on, there's a supply gap of at least 5 gigawatts or 5,000 megawatts. Current installed capacity is in excess of 58,000 megawatts, but the availability is quite a bit lower than that. So the scale of development in the electricity market in South Africa is massive. There's no other market in South Africa that presents in Africa that presents such an opportunity. And it's evidenced by the fact that we've got a whole bunch of developers coming from Europe, from France, from Italy, from Spain, etc., looking to invest in who have invested in the power sector in South Africa. So in terms of gas to power that I mentioned, there's 3,000 megawatt RFP that should be coming to market. There's more renewables RFPs currently in play in the market as well, and I'll share some numbers quickly with you on a later slide. But we're currently in round 6, as my colleague mentioned earlier, sorry, round 5 and 6, as my colleague mentioned earlier on. So that's about 5,000 megawatts. As shown on the slide, there are some constraints in the Northern Cape in terms of grid capacity. So there's a need to invest in the grid, and that talks to significant further investment in that space as well. Eskom, which is the major utility in South Africa, is currently going through a restructuring or an unbundling process. So there's an investment there to help them transition and to repurpose some of their plants, from coal to gas or other solutions. And we as a bank are obviously happy to help developers and clients to understand the market better so that you can actually take advantage of the investment opportunity and get comfort that, in fact, it's a market that the rest of the world is looking at with a lot of enthusiasm. Here, once again, you can see a couple of numbers with regards to the investment value. We estimate that over the next 2 years, about 16 billion euros of new investment is going to come into South Africa because of this investment in power alone. And forget about what's going to be invested in the rail and port sector as well, which is going to be quite substantive. So this is really massive. I mean, there's massive scale here. Tariffs are significantly under pressure in South Africa. They've come down quite a lot from the first rounds, which started way back in 2011. So tariffs are obviously also very attractive for the government. Equity returns are being squeezed, but so are the banks being squeezed in terms of what they're charging as margins. And this just really talks once again to the investment values for each of the rounds. And you can look at this yourself in the slides that I will share with Mr. Mavridis. Quickly to mention decentralized energy, we are involved with many clients, in the mining space, specifically major clients like Anglo, Tronox, Exxaro, all these big names who are looking to also procure power off-grid, significant investments, looking to work with developers, looking for power solutions, and we are working with them, not just in South Africa, but also in regional economies like Zimbabwe and so forth as you go into sub-Saharan Africa. So once again, massive opportunity there as well. I thought I would share a quick little slide on what happened with Scatec, which is a Nordic-based developer. They invested in some renewables in the early sort of part of the program, and in fact last week we announced that they closed about a 1 billion euro investment in 150 megawatts of hybrid power and hybrid PV and battery solutions, which we financed as a bank. And it shows you the confidence that these investors actually have in the market. And it talks to the fact that there's an enabling environment in South Africa. There's a clear sort of process around procurement. And yes, there were delays early on, but we've got a well-established PPP framework, which compares with the best in the world. We've got a legal framework which is amongst the best in the world. You've got, the government underpinning the payment obligations of the utility in the power sector, and it talks to the fact that you've got people like Scatec and of course EDF of France, Engie of France, Enel of Italy, Globeleq of the UK, Total investing in this market, which has to say quite a lot. The banking market, as my colleague from Aspen mentioned as well, is very sophisticated. Term lending goes out to 18, 20 years. Margins are tight, aggressive covenants in line with what you're seeing across Europe. So nothing that would be unfamiliar to Greek investors in this market as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Mavridis and guests.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kotsavos. It was indeed very interesting, and I think everybody has listened very carefully your analysis of the situation in that sector of South Africa. We move forward to the last of our speakers, but not least, is Mr. Harry Gouvelis, Vice President of the Hellenic Community of Pretoria, who will refer to the potential areas of opportunities and developments that could be enhanced bilateral trade and economic development from the perspective of the Greek community in South Africa. So we're talking about people, places, and products. Mr. Harry Gouvelis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, honorary guests, the participants. I'm coming at the tail end, so I'm not going to give you slides. Well, I will share them with Adoni, who can distribute them. I'm just going to, right at the end, I'm going to share one with you. But for now, as Adoni said, I'm coming from the perspective of the Greek community here in South Africa, and many times we mentioned the numbers and where they're concentrated, and perhaps the context within which we come from is one where, and it's again, it's a world context of competition, cooperation, co-creation, conflict, that we all feel whatever our Greek counterparts are feeling in terms of all those C's: competition, cooperation, and conflict. But equally so, I think and particularly during the COVID times, we've seen the role of technological change taking a front seat. And we live with the disruptive and transformative power of social media, artificial intelligence, big data. That's the kind of environment that we're grappling with here in South Africa as well. And that's provided opportunities and challenges. And with that, of course, comes an increased velocity of information flows and information interdependence. So within that context, who are the people and the Greek community of South Africa, and how do we see ourselves? Certainly, I think we see ourselves as actors. And by that, I mean, we don't see ourselves as passive receptors of policy and regulation, but rather we see ourselves as autonomous. We see ourselves exercising our agency with the will to act, with the power to act, and in fact, successfully so across the global stage. There's a number of Greek South African companies that have entered international markets very successfully. So we see ourselves as a resource. We see ourselves as partners to Greek investors across the professions. We are sector specialists, as you've encountered today with our colleagues. We are industry experts. There's executives. There's entrepreneurs. We see ourselves very much in co-creators of businesses, of opportunities, of transactions. And we are able to very comfortably, I think, navigate this hybrid identity we have as Greek and South African. and navigate the spaces. And in fact, we're fairly mobile, not only in terms of physical mobility, but mobile in terms of the conceptual, the institutional, and knowledge landscapes that we can move across, as well as the jurisdictions and sectors. So we see ourselves as intermediators, as catalysts, and Viforea, the vehicle through which we circulate knowledge and information on business and business practices. So it's a dynamic view that we have of our community and of ourselves. And I think that comes across quite strongly, and it did with the two colleagues that spoke previously. That, of course, and given the context of technological change, given the context of who we are, I think the first opportunity is one where it would be a high contact, low friction opportunity, one that does not necessarily rely on big structural and policy frameworks, but one that is enjoys low costs of transaction, low regulatory barriers, and an immediacy of exchange. And that's, of course, services, design, advertising, marketing, technology, coding, all those kind of things that are people-to-people based, that through technology can then can become immediate in the transaction. And I think it's something that perhaps is not quite the traditional trade and investment area that we talk about, but I think it's something that creates a dynamism and creates a momentum and creates a people-to-people kind of exchange that allows for broader development and broader economic development and further exchanges. So it's for me, it would be interesting to see the technology hubs, the innovation hubs, any kind of platform businesses entering the South African market and being immediately able to transact and exchange with South Africans, and in particular, obviously, Greek South Africans who, as I said, are able to navigate this hybrid identity quite nimbly. And these, but these, of course, rely on curiosity, on creativity, and of course, it must make commercial sense. So that would be my first opportunity that I identified. And with that, we move into kind of different products. I think we've very eloquently heard about the energy, and the pharmaceutical opportunities. But there's certainly opportunities in terms of technology. I think fintech, agri-tech, property tech. We have a vibrant technology space in South Africa, as small as it may be in comparison to other international locations. But certainly it's innovative, it's creative. And the Silicon Valley of South Africa is in Stellenbosch. And I think that can create immediate contact for people that are interested in those spaces. I think another under-mentioned space is the knowledge industry, whether it's education, the research industry, the evidence-based industry, skills and training. I think that we haven't really explored, and I think those are the kind of spaces that we should be exploring. Agriculture, yes, also in the traditional sense, but also I was thinking, you know, there are many times we don't exchange knowledge. We don't exchange the kind of modes of doing that both economies that rely quite heavily on agriculture are capable, and the same goes for tourism, are capable of exchanging the kind of skills and experiences. My colleague previously talked about finance, insurance, banking, very sophisticated markets in South Africa. And again, a whole bunch of exchanges can take place without necessarily involving a classic trade and investment commercial transaction. An under-resourced, an under-mentioned and under-examined, I think, sector is also the creative industries, film, music, culture. I have a friend of mine who's currently online watching us, who's many times hosted and facilitated Greek film companies filming in South Africa, filming whether it be advertisements or movies. Music, I think, is another one where we haven't looked at. So the creative industries is something that we need to look at, I think, a little bit more carefully. And then the artisanal kind of bespoke products that people make. I think there's a market, there's definitely a market for that. And again, low-hanging fruit, low friction, immediate results. Talking about our role as members of the Greek community, as intermediators and initiators, there's, of course, other modes of investment, the more classic ones at corporate level, there's the venture capital, private equity, foreign direct investment, where we can play a role both in terms of catalyzing, in terms of providing professional services. These Greek South Africans in the corporate finance industry, management, accountants, auditors, so that can navigate these highly regulated sectors, that are able to provide the necessary advice, including, for example, on ESG investments and impacts, the environmental, social, and governance. We are also able to leverage international networks, because I think as Greek South Africans, what we also forget is we're not just Greek South Africans, but we also have colleagues and friends and family that are Greek South Africans that perhaps have moved to London or the United States or Australia or other places. We have family and friends in the rest of Africa. There's a large Greek community, large in terms of our numbers. But there's a presence throughout the whole of Africa of a Greek community that we have networks with. So our hybrid identity has a number of dimensions that we can leverage, and through that leverage networks internationally. And there's also a number. I was glad to hear that the Johannesburg Chamber of Commerce has got MOUs, but we also need to look at perhaps city to city, region to region kind of exchanges and discussions. Again, in sectors that cluster around certain geographic areas that allow for greater trade and investment to happen. And sharing, again, knowledge, sharing models of doing, ways of thinking, ways of approaching, and being able to transact at that level. The benefits of the diaspora, and those are well documented in research that's throughout the world, is that in fact there's improved contract enforcement, because there's greater understanding and knowledge of what it takes to stick to contracts and terms and conditions, in-depth market information, better knowledge blending. There's the cultural comfort of being able to speak the language and understand the cultures. There's the benefit of local knowledge. And of course, there's the emotional connection, and that creates a certain sense of resilience through the difficult times and through the ups and downs that come with trade and investment. So those are the benefits of involving the diaspora and involving Greek South Africans in trade and investment. In terms of an agenda for action, I would strongly urge networking and more networking. It's about creating those connections. It's about creating those networks and activating them and understanding people, and more, not necessarily talk shops, but more opportunities to exchange views and knowledge and ideas in order to then spark something, the creative juices to look at the opportunities and the commercial transactions that can come from them. I think we need to be a lot more digital, as we are doing. I think the new normal, which is a word I hate, but this webinar was unthinkable, I think, five years ago. It wasn't something that we could even comfortably think of. But this is the way we've quickly connected. Adonia and I have chatted about this quickly, and things happen digitally. Being more adaptive, certainly being more agile, and combining, again, being far more local, but understanding that we can be international as well. That was very briefly. I just want to share, I'll send it to you, Adonia. What I have done is I've taken my own advice with a distinguished audience like this, and created a very quick little group on LinkedIn called the South Africa Hellenic Business Network. And I can share that with everybody. Again, just with very humble ambitions to create a database of people that are interested in doing business in South Africa and Africa and Greece. And LinkedIn is a lovely platform to do that. So hopefully it's about people, connecting places, and then connecting the products and services that go with it. And the Hellenic community of South Africa is open for those connections and that network. Thank you, Adonia.
Thank you so much, Harry. And thanks to all the participants and the speakers that they have contributed to this webinar. And I would like now to move to the Q&A session. if there are any questions before we have in the concluding remarks by Dr. Moussouris. Please, any questions? Or if you would like to address them to the chamber, and then we can individually service with every one of the speakers or any institution in South Africa that might be able to assist with the question. Okay, I can also say that the presentations of all the speakers, that they will be made available in the website of the chamber, so you can also have a more detailed look into the data and the information which is contained and take the matters further. Mr. Moussouris, would you like to proceed with the closing remarks, please?
Thank you, Anthony. I think we have experienced a very rich discussion with very valuable information. We have a total picture of the economy of South Africa, of course, in few words, because one can talk a lot about the economy of South Africa, by Mr. Botes, Ms. Makaya, Mr. Agaven, Ms. Zeiler. It is a sophisticated economy, a diversified economy, a developed country with parts which are developing. It was interesting, the emphasis on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Regional agreements give huge markets, and this is very attractive to investors. The unemployment is a problem that really bedevils South Africa. High skills are needed. Energy is an issue. The renewables, which is the future, the green power. We heard about the pharmaceuticals, which very interesting discussion about how South Africa faced the pandemic with production. The food security, and so on. I will not discuss further because it's the discussion today, the presentations were very, very interesting, and we all will be available in our website. What I want to think is what will be our next step to this very valuable discussion. Maybe we should concentrate next time into certain sectors. Maybe after that, we should prepare a business mission with a good preparation. And I think all of you who participated will be helpful in that. I don't want to take more of your time. I want to thank you all for your very interesting ideas, presentations. I wish to thank the embassies of South Africa in Athens and Mrs. Sisulu and her colleagues. I want to thank the embassy of Greece in South Africa with my friend Giorgos Garabosita. It's good to see you again, even from far away. And I want to thank you, Mr. Mavridis. Mr. Mavridis was for years the economic advisor of the African Embassy, and he's member of our board. And I'm glad to see also among us Ellen Vasu, who was along with Jacob Jacobs and myself, the persons who created this chamber. Thank you very much. And I take Mr. Gouvelli's words very seriously because he gave us indications, ideas about the sectors where a Greek activity will be interesting. Technology, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, creative industries. I like that. Music, films, art, city to city. And the idea is to exchange views and be creative. Thank you again, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Spahis from EPCAM. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice presentation.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Once again, bye-bye to everyone.
Bye-bye.